Hey everyone, I am thrilled to have a true innovator and thought leader in the arena of service experience, customer experience on the show today. Ron, how are you?
Great to be here with you, Evan. Hello to all your watchers, your listeners all over the world.
And all over the world, speaking of which, you are in Singapore, a longtime resident. Let's start there about from your, journey to service excellence, which started decades ago. Introductions are in order. Give us your backstory.
My backstory is that I got very involved in the sport of ultimate Frisbee back in the earliest days. And so I'm the guy who took the rules of that game around the world, translated it into different languages, but not only organized players associations and tournaments, but also festivals, family play days to get people out into the park, learn the throws, the catches, the games, the sport. And I learned about adult educational design. So back in the 80s, the 70s even, Singapore's economy was changing. The manufacturing went to China, and all the back office and data processing and call centers went to India. And so the country realized it had to come up the value chain. And if you look at Singapore today, it's all services. It's financial,
Mm.
medical, legal, convention, hospitality, supply chain, high-end logistics. And they needed to educate hundreds of thousands of working adults in how do you actually give somebody else a better service experience, and needed someone who could make that curriculum, could make that educational experience engaging, effective, enjoyable for adults. I knew how to do that from Frisbee festivals. So they invited me for 1 week. It became a month. It became 7 months. It's become 34 years.
34 years. Time flies indeed. And you talk about creating uplifting service cultures, which you've done so well. How do you define that? That's kind of a nebulous concept.
That's actually a great way to start the conversation. Good question, Evan. Uplifting service, that name was chosen very specifically for three reasons for the word uplifting. Number one is, of course, for whoever the customer or the client is or the internal colleague, you want to give them an uplifted service experience, better service. But for the service providers, it should also feel uplifting to give somebody else more value, to respond to their needs, to be more effective in what it is that you're doing for them, the action that you take. And the third is that, at least back several decades ago, the whole idea of being in service to somebody else could be seen as diminishing.
Hmm.
Like, you're the lower person because you're serving someone. I said, no, 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 no. We need a different definition of the word service. So the definition I use is this: service is taking action to create value for someone. And if you think about it, just like your eyes popped up, it makes sense in every industry. It makes sense for every position, internal and external. Well, that means that the service provider, far from being the subservient person, they're the creator of value
Hmm.
for others. And that distinguishes the whole idea of being in service.
A wonderful notion. And talk about cultural transformation. You work with many B2B companies. What are the sort of foundational elements that need to be in place to transform an organization's culture to be, uplifting and service driven?
Got it. So you're right. The number of organizations, the diversity of organizations that I work with include every major industry in countries all over the world. We've been translated my materials into 15 languages, as
Wow.
well as government agencies, schools, universities, nonprofits. So you think about it, everybody's doing something for somebody else in some form of organization. That is a service. The culture of service involves three major elements. Number one is, most of us did not learn in school, what does it mean to have a customer? How do you actually create a value for other people? How do you respond more effectively to someone's changing requests? What happens when you get a group of customers who have certain needs and then in the middle of service delivery, something changes? We aren't taught that in school. And so it lands on our businesses to have to teach people the fundamentals of providing somebody else with more value through the action that you provide. Now, and that's not just the external customer, but it could also be internal. So people, let's say from shift to shift, or head office to field office, or from one department to another. And so all of the internal coordination that goes on within organizations is a form of what I call internal service. So the better internal service culture you have with each other, the easier it is for the organization to provide that external customer or client with a better service experience. So we have to start by teaching people what they didn't learn in school. And then there are building blocks for organizations, things like who do you recruit? How do you orient new people? How do people get recognized and rewarded? How do you capture the voice of customer and who actually hears it? How does the organization respond to it? What do you do when things go wrong? What's your service recovery policy? And there are 12 building blocks that I've discerned and then found the best practices and help organizations do an audit to see how are we doing in what we're doing and how do we improve those. And then the third and final piece is the leadership of the organization. Service can often be seen like, well, get those people that serve the customer to do a better job. But if the leaders don't know what it is that they're talking about, if they can't walk the talk the talk, and actually perform as better service providers internally for their staff, then the culture never really takes hold.
A brilliant insight. And when you talk to clients, what do you see as the biggest misconceptions about establishing a service culture exist? What are the pitfalls that you come across again and again?
Well, in today's era, it seems like everybody thinks that technology is going to make everything better. Like, oh, it's all going to be a technologically driven world. And so the people are going to be less important. Not at all true. Because all of the tech that we're building, in order for it to be valuable, you're talking about a human being who's going to be the recipient of and the assessor of whether or not that's actually valuable. So when you design technology, you've got to be thinking about it in terms of doing it for a human. Not just improving efficiency, not just getting greater productivity, but having the human experience of being supported by that technology being better. And that means that people who are developers, I know you've got a lot of them listening in on the call here, for example, have to be thinking about not just how do I make it work, but how do I make it work and make it a good experience for the human being who's going to be the user of it, the recipient of it, the customer of it. A good example of that is when banks closed their branches and wanted everybody to go, ATMs and drive-throughs. And then they wanted us all to go online. And now it's all just being done on apps, which is fine, except that you've got a lot of banking customers who are a bit older, who happen to have a lot of wealth, who aren't necessarily as comfortable with that digital device as the younger generations are. Now, that doesn't mean that you leave the branches open, but it may mean that the bank needs to provide other human beings, preferably friendly people, attractive people who can spend a little time with those older customers to be right there with them and teach them how to make the migration, teach them how the new app works, and give them the human to human encouragement. That's right. I knew you could do it. Just like that. Oh, you're getting the hang of this. By the time somebody's helped somebody else one or two times, then you won't need to provide that help anymore. And you've successfully migrated the human into a more technologically driven platform. But notice that the organization can't think about that as sort of a second thought. You should be designing that into the way you're going to cascade and roll out that new tech in the first place.
A brilliant thought. So everyone's now focused on measuring everything, people, processes, businesses. I mean, how do you measure the success of service initiatives if you're a global brand, if you're Starbucks? And when there's
Yeah,
so
if
many
you're
intangible elements and, you're dealing with people across the globe.
and you're dealing with people across the globe in different cultures who have different expectations, who have different preferences, and it's fast changing. Not
Mm.
only because humans are changing and our ecosystem of social media, et cetera, is constantly stimulating us in different ways, but the competition is always changing. So one of the principles we teach is called measure what really matters. So let's use a commercial business that has a top line revenue objective, has a bottom line profitability target. It's got shareholder value. It's got share of market. Those are the top financial outcomes that an organization wants to achieve. How do you know that you're going to get that? Well, a precursor, a pre-indicator of that would be if you are doing well in all of your scores. If your customer satisfaction score, your loyalty score, your customer effort score is going down, your employee engagement score is going up, if all your survey indices are improving, then you know you're going to get the financial outcomes. But you don't necessarily do those surveys every day. So then what would be the precursor, the indicator that you're going to do well on your survey scores? Well, that would be if you're getting a lot of compliments. If you're getting a lot of compliments and people are giving you the 5-star reviews and the pat on the back and the attaboys, and then when the survey time comes around, you're going to do well, and that you're going to be hitting your financial targets. Now, why do people give you a compliment? Is anybody going to give you a compliment for doing what they expected? No, if you do what's expected, like you satisfy the customer, you're not going to get a compliment for that. People will give you a compliment when you come up with some insight, some idea, and take some action that isn't necessarily what they already expect. So then what you want, if you're the leader of an organization, is to measure in your culture, how many new ideas have we come up with this month? How many new actions have we taken this week? And it's not just externally for the customer. You could, for example, say, we're going to have a contest inside the organization, a special award given by the CEO. But the only way that you can win it is if more than one department collaborate with each other and figure out ways to work more effectively with each other. Great. So then you've just driven the urge to create more ideas to improve internal service, which makes the organization more efficient, provides the compliments, the recommendations, etc.
Oh, so well said. You mentioned employee engagement. As you know, we're in a crisis of engagement in the US, but other places globally.
Yeah.
It's a real problem. Even before the job starts, a third of Gen Z employees aren't showing up the first day for the job. So, how do you build a service culture around employees that feel empowered and engaged on a day-to-day basis? And who's doing it well?
Well, in every industry, there are companies that are doing it well. And remember, I referred to those 12 building blocks. So I'm going to use an example of just one of the blocks. It's block number 2. It's called an engaging service vision. Now, I don't really care if an organization calls it a mission, a vision, a credo, a values, principles, guiding light. Doesn't matter. What matters is it engaging? Is it about service? And does it provide the kind of vision that makes people say, I want to work there? I want to be a part of that. So I give you an example. Singapore Airlines has a tagline. It says, service, even other airlines talk about.
Wow.
Yeah, exactly. Now imagine what that feels like if you're chosen to be a member of the cabin crew, or you're hired as a pilot, or you're somebody who works in sales. I mean, you literally are coming to work in an organization where this ethos is, what can we do that's unique and distinctive and different? And it's not just a vision. They've got the recognition programs for it. They've got the communications that they use throughout the organization to tell each other about what each other is doing that makes that real, that makes that come alive. So there are many other organizations that are of a similar ilk. You probably know the credo from Ritz-Carlton Hotel. It says, we are ladies and gentlemen serving ladies and gentlemen. Now, that's kind of a cool phrase because it automatically attracts people who want to work in a sophisticated, elegant, refined environment, and it automatically keeps away those who are more hard charging or should be working at Club Med. Right. So just having that engaging vision. Nokia, for example, when we worked with them, 6 words: know how, act now, create wow. Steris, which does sterilization of hospital equipment. Now they've got, you go into a surgical suite, you go into an ambulance, you go into an emergency room. Every single piece of equipment's got to be sterilized after every single use. And a lot of that equipment is the same across the different ecosystems. But the environment where it's being used is different. So the phrase that we help them develop, and they've built a whole culture around it now, is called achieving one-of-a-kind service. In other words, they want each customer to feel like the way we are serving you is one of a kind. We know who you are. We know what you need. Now, if you work in an organization like that, and you were recruited into an organization that you know is like that, and you were oriented into an organization where they showed you that it was real, and people were being recognized for it and compensated for it. And then you build a kind of culture where people want to come to work because they're proud to work there and they feel good about themselves when they do the work that the company is all about.
Well, wonderful sentiment. But I have to ask you, with the rise of digital and AI, we have more channels than ever. Everyone's pushing for automation and conversational AI and chatbots. How do you balance this human touch that you're talking about with technology to keep this uplifting service vision when frankly, we're being bombarded with tech that sort of designed to automate and, relieve humans of any service interactions.
Well, that's an interesting expression. Relieve humans of any service interactions. Yet, when you think about what we are as humans, what makes us human is not just our ability to interface with digital tech, right? We are people who are dependent upon other people. We were created by other people. We were raised by other people. If we have a sense of affection, it's for, well, it could be for dogs, it could be for pets, it could be for nature, etc. But we're human. Philosophically, and I enjoy that kind of study as well, there's been a mistake going on for quite some time where the entire philosophical universe has been focusing on what is a human being? And that's the wrong question. The right question is, what is being human? It would be like asking, what is a tree? But not wanting to talk about clouds, rain, fire, dirt, birds. The fact that the dirt that the tree is growing out of used to be old trees that all fell apart and did. So now you look at a human being in the human ecosystem of our society, and we happen to be alive in an era where technology, as you said, is bombarding us. How far does that need to go before we start to realize that's not terribly satisfying? I don't feel emotionally fulfilled. How do I get a sense of well-being in my life? And that's part of why you're seeing the pendulum going like this right now. Yes, boy, have we developed technology, and that's not going to stop. But we've also got to get even more aware and more sensitive and responsive to and providing for human beings' emotional care, well-being of your body, well-being of your relationships, well-being of your role in community, well-being of your participation in society. And given the fact that we're all mortal, and the question really is, what are you going to do with the rest of your life? Then you don't want people saying, well, I'm just trying to score as many likes as I can before I die. You want people who are actually looking at life and saying, what kind of a contribution can I make to the well-being of others?
A wonderful, uplifting sentiment. So if you're a business leader, CXO, watching, listening, what is their role in building a service culture beyond buying and reading your book? Are there specific actions or behaviors that they need to really embark on to implement an uplifting service culture?
Yeah, aside from buying and reading the book and going to the YouTube channel and enjoying the hundreds of videos that are there, if you're the CXO, then you really, I don't want to make it too hard and say you have a responsibility. Let's just say you have the privilege of being the person inside of a complex organization whose job it is to keep that interface of taking care of other people, that interface of listening to the concerns, the anxieties, the hopes, the dreams, the fears of other people, internally and externally, and making that something that the people inside the organization become curious about, become good at, and then are open, willing to, and share with each other to come up with ways to respond to. So I really think that a CXO today is one of the most important people in the C-suite, and you need to take your responsibility as, it's like, if you're legal, make sure people don't end up in court. If you're finance, make sure we don't go bankrupt. But if you're CXO, make sure that people are focusing on, thinking about, curious about, paying attention to the experience of the human beings. Those are called customers. The experience of internal colleagues. Those are called internal service providers, another form of customer. And that's your job to keep that at the top of people's curiosity.
Well said. Well, that's a mic drop moment. So we'll switch to you. What are you excited about 2025? What's on your radar the next few months and weeks? What sort of trends are you looking at? Do you have any travel or events coming up?
Yeah, pre-COVID, I was a guy literally on 100 flights a year. There was that moment when I was platinum in 3 different airline groups. And
Wow.
I was like, this has gone too far. And COVID came along, and it was a gift in a way because it settled me down. And so my wife and I right now are in the process of designing. We're going to be building a house in a nearby neighborhood from the condominium where we live now. And the objective is to create a space to thrive in place. And of course, as people get older, they're thinking about, you want it to be elder friendly. You don't have wires on the floor you trip on, and make sure if you need an elevator, if it's multi-story, that kind of thing. But in addition to that, we're the kind of people, we're going to get to know every single person in the neighborhood. Because you know that up and down the street in different directions, you've got somebody whose kids go to work every day and they're left sitting in front of watching the television. But across the street and down the road, there's somebody else who's in the same situation, but they don't actually get to spend time with each other. Well, we're those kinds of people that are going to engage with the customers in our neighborhood, even though they don't know that they are yet, and turn it into an environment, where people say, I'm glad I live here. We know the other people, we're connected. And you've heard, just like all of us have, that one of the key indicators of living a long, healthy life is the social relationships that you have. Well, those don't come because you picked them up off the shelf in the store. You got to go put your effort into them, just like a company has to put the effort into listening and demonstrating the fact that they care about their customers. We're going to take that on as a project for ourselves in our own personal lives.
Well, what an inspiration. I'm going to potentially copy you there. I love that big idea. Thanks so much, as always, Ron, for joining and sharing your time here. And everyone, follow Ron on LinkedIn and other channels, YouTube and more, where you're a prolific content creator and speaker. So your videos are pure gold. Thanks so much for joining, Ron.
Thank you very much, Evan. Pleasure to be here with you today. For those who want to find me, it's just ronkaufman.com.
Excellent. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for listening, watching, and sharing. And take care.